With this lesson, I'm going to update you on the latest changes or redesign they have added to QuickBooks Online bank feeds, or some people call it QuickBooks Online downloaded transactions. The most obvious one is the general look and feel. Generally, when I work in QuickBooks Online bank feeds, which you access by clicking on the transactions button and then clicking on banking, generally once I get in here, I collapse my left navigation bar so I have a little bit more real estate to work with, and then I'm only looking at bank feeds at the moment. So the most obvious change that they made is the overall look and feel of the bank account or the account selector. When you click on that drop-down menu up here, you can choose whether you're working with a credit card or a bank account. Notice that the logos themselves also change, so that's pretty neat. That kind of alerts you. If you look at the logos, they're very subtle, but you can know which of them it's a credit card, which of it is a checking account or a bank account. So just the logo itself is really neat because you can see that, and then you see the names really clear. The font, it's just a lot easier to read. One of the complaints that people had is with the sort of the old look, it was a little bit harder to read, and the data seemed to be all bunched up in there. Also, when you select the accounts by just clicking on what they're calling here the bank cards, you see a very obvious, that blue highlight is very easy to read. When you click on the account selector as well, you can select any of the accounts you want. It automatically switches on the screen for you. When you click on the card selector, you can select the option that says Reorder Accounts. Once you click on Reorder Accounts, it will take you to a little window which it basically previews all the bank accounts and credit cards that you have connected to your bank or that you're downloading transactions from, and you can change the order. So if I wanted my bank account to be before my credit card account, I click on this little pencil up here, and then I just click and drag right until I find the right order. Then I have them on the order that I want, and then I click on save, and then I'm done. And at the end, basically, they will shift in order here on the left-hand side and on the drop-down menu. Towards the right, you got a button that says link account. That's basically to connect a new account, a new bank into your QuickBooks Online bank feed. So that hasn't changed. When you click on that drop down, you see the order checks and the upload manual file buttons. Those are still there. And then you got the update button that you can press at any point in time, and it will connect to your bank and download those transactions. So that hasn't changed much, or just the look and feel of those buttons. Down here on this caret, this little arrow pointing up, if I click on that, it will close those two bank cards for me. I will still know via the header here which account I'm working on at the moment, but this will collapse and get rid of those. Usually I don't need to look at those things. Information that's there, bank balance in QuickBooks, is really not that relevant to me. Number of transactions is, because that kind of lets me know how much work I have left, but at the end of the day, I don't need to have them open. I'm all about having as much real estate as possible on the screen, because I can still click on the drop down here and see some of that relevant information. Also, while you're on the screen, if you're working on Google Chrome, which is my preferred browser of choice, you hit Control plus and Control minus, and you can zoom in or make the font bigger and smaller. So this is going to be up to personal preference. You want to do this based on what looks best for you, your screen size, all of that stuff. Here to the bottom, you're going to see for review. These are all the transactions that are left for you to enter. So they have been downloaded and they're waiting for you to choose a category so they can post. Then you have categorized. These are the ones that you have already entered or categorized. So they were downloaded, they were accepted or matched by you, or they were created through this workflow. And now they're going to show up in here just to let you know what you have created. We can go back to that, and then excluded all the ones that we removed. So if we saw a duplicate or there was an overlap from the last time we had the books ready and we made the download, we can delete all the excess one that's from a closed period or last year or whatever it happens to be. So that would be under excluded. And if you want to get rid of something permanently because you don't even want to see it under excluded, you can select them all by clicking on that little checkbox and then click on delete. Most people are not dealing with excluded, I guess, again, unless they're having duplicates or an overlap somehow because of the way they connect to the banks. Usually excluded, it's a very rarely used situation. Then you have all the columns. That hasn't changed much. You click on date, it will sort by date. You click on description, it will sort by description. You click on payee, it will sort by payee, right? So depending on which one you click on, it will sort them. The only one that it won't sort in this case is this one here called action. That doesn't do anything, but you can sort by date, payee, category, all of that stuff. Now these columns, class and location, these are optional if you have those things turned on in QuickBooks, those features. Class and location, you can choose to have them there. Or also, let's say you're not doing class and locations on your bank feeds, you can just uncheck them and it will get rid of them. Down here, all the way in the bottom, notice you can choose how many transactions you want to see on the screen at once. So if you want to see 50, 75, 100, 150, 300, up to you really how many you want to be working at the same time. So right now, I have pretty much all the options turned off. You can pick and choose which of these you want. So I'm going to sort by date again. And then we're going to talk about a couple of options here. So we have this option that says show bank details. This has been in QuickBooks Online for a while, but it's really important to understand how this works together with the new things that they have added. So when I click on show bank details, this is going to show me, if you see right here on kind of the main screen, this shows me the actual text that the bank downloaded. So pure, unadulterated, the actual information that came from the bank, it's what you see in there. Now you will notice that if I uncheck show bank details, QuickBooks will clean them up for me. Let's see if we go to ones that are a little bit more obvious. Let's go to my credit card. I think those payees typically are cleaned a lot more. So I'm going to go down here and click on show bank details. So you get to see the full information. Notice that you got store numbers, codes after certain transactions. You're going to see, basically the full information that comes from the bank. But if I uncheck show bank details, notice that it cleans it up for me. So if you look at Nickelodeon Slime City, that's one example, right? And then let's just click here again and we'll scroll down until we see that again. So here we go. Notice that when I click on show bank details, it will actually clean it up and just put Nickelodeon for me. Now, this is not the payee that QuickBooks is creating for you. It's suggesting what the payee is. So depending on how well your particular bank works in terms of bringing information in, some banks bring a lot of crap. Some banks, the information they bring is really useful. And then you have to determine whether or not this QuickBooks payee cleanup process works for you. However, the reason why you want to know about this feature is one of the major things that they have added is the option to turn on grouping. Now, grouping works better when you don't have bank details showing. So one of the things, or kind of let's say the antidote to show bank details, would be copy bank detail to memo. Because then what happens is if I actually go down here to Nickelodeon, when I create the transaction, it cleaned up Nickelodeon for me, kind of just giving me a hint of what the payee should be. Then I'm actually going to create the payee or choose it from my existing database here. So I'm just going to kind of just copy and paste that text in there so I don't have to type. So I'm going to copy and paste and then click on the add button, which is basically the little pencil with a ruler that automatically will create it as a vendor. And then we click on save. The other thing is really cool is this screen is getting a lot more responsive. So you'll see that once you get this upgrade in your QuickBooks Online, you will love kind of the look and feel behind it. Now, QuickBooks is suggesting or guessing that this is meals and entertainment. At that point, I can challenge it by changing it to something else, or I can leave it there, right? So depending on the circumstance. But notice that on the memo field is the original full bank text. So I think that in combination, show bank details, if that's turned off, you definitely want to copy bank detail to memo. In other cases, even if it is copying it to the memo, I still want to see it on this screen. I don't want it to clean up the vendor names for me. So that's really up to you. But let's say, for example, I have unchecked show bank details, and then I click on turn on grouping. This is the big change they did in the middle of 2020. And now depending on which column I have sorted, it will group. So notice that right now it's grouping them in this case by month. Let me go back to the bank. Hopefully the bank has a lot more months in here. So let me refresh that. Perfect. Now I'm going to click on the gear menu and then choose, let's say, 300 transactions, because I'm hoping that I will have more than 1 month in this screen. And then I'm going to click right here on January, collapse that, click on February, collapse that, click on March. Look at that. It's really, really awesome. So now it just lets me really organize the screen, have a lot of information, but organize the screen. So that would be grouped by date if I have it sorted by date. But instead, if I sort it by description, right? So now what it will do is it will basically group it by vendor. So notice I can start collapsing some of these vendors here, right? And sometimes in a real high level view, you start seeing what the vendors are. Now I don't see a collapse all button yet. That would be pretty nice if they had like a button that just collapses the whole thing, but I don't see that working there. So for now, if I want to collapse them, I have to do one by one. Hopefully by the time you watch this tutorial, they have updated that and listened to me and added a collapse and expand button that can collapse and expand them all. But sometimes I find it really neat that I just downloaded basically like 800 transactions from my bank because I'm doing multiple months at the same time. And instead of just seeing a whole bunch of transactions in there, I get to see this sort of a really high level view. I see how many expenditures, in this case it's a credit card, I have per vendor. So that gives me some context. I look at the vendor, look at the dollar amounts. Now, generally, while they're grouped, they're not really that useful. If they're collapsed like this, generally you want to have them expanded so you can do your categories. The one thing that I wish it did is when you have it collapsed and they all had, let's say in this case Adobe Acrobat, if they all had a rule attached to it, it would be pretty neat that when you close it, you see a rule button there letting me know that these are all ready to go. That way I can just mark it right next to it and click on accept, because if I do that, it will accept 5 transactions in one shot. So it would be pretty nice if you can see maybe a subtotal here and whether or not there's a rule involved with it while it is collapsed. Well, I guess we'll see if they develop this as we go. For the time being, you want to kind of manipulate these as they are expanded. So right now, this particular expenditure was categorized by a rule. That's why you see the rule icon and you see it in green, pretty much letting me know that what I've told QuickBooks to do before we started downloading the rules I created, it's going to follow them and do the automatic categorization for you. At this point, I could click on add one by one if I wanted to, or I can just click on the little checkbox next to my group and then click on accept here in the top and reclassify or classify and book all in one shot. Take a look at Amazon. There's 68 Amazons in there. I'm going to expand that, and then maybe I want to look at all the Amazons that I have. If I click on spent to organize by dollar amount, unfortunately it will now regroup them into money in, money out, which is nice as well. I think it's kind of smart with the grouping, but I kind of wish I could have it grouped by payee, which is my preferred way to have it, but also be able to maybe sort in here. That would be pretty awesome as well. But unfortunately, once you click on spent or receive to get your order, it's going to change the grouping. Again, the grouping is smart grouping. It's based on what's organized. Anyway, by default, if I don't get to sort by what the transactions are inside the grouping, it's going to organize them by date automatically, which is the second most logical choice. I like sorting by dollar amount, but that's my thing. So now after I go down Amazon here and I say, you know what, all these Amazon expenses are pretty much under $500. I'm going to send them all to office supplies. So I can click on the little checkbox next to Amazon. I can click on update here. And in the update, I now can change what the payee is, what the category is, what the class and location, all in one shot. So in here, I'm going to create Amazon my vendor, which I have not created yet. So I'm going to create it real quick and then click on save and then click on apply and accept. And basically that added the payee and then it left the office supplies category that was already in there. And while you're kind of watching QuickBooks Think, it literally just entered 68 transactions for me all in one shot. Now I'm going to click on categorized up here so we can see what was categorized. In here, in the categorized section, there isn't a smart grouping, let's say, yet. But it would be pretty cool if in this screen you can group them as well, because that would also be a little bit contextual. For the time being, you can actually see what the expense that was entered, and you can just simply click on any of them, and it will take you to the original transaction that was entered into QuickBooks. You can see the original memo because we told it to copy those bank details to memo. That becomes super useful as well. And then I can change any of these categories if I want to, right? It's because I already pushed them into QuickBooks, but I can simply just go into it one by one here in the category section, or I can click undo, like I'm gonna undo a couple of them. Okay, so so that basically send them back to for review. So now you can see my Amazons are now back in for review. Now you will notice that this time QuickBooks put the payee Amazon in here, because before I didn't have the payee created, before I didn't do a transaction with that payee, QuickBooks didn't know how to book it together. Now it knows. So now it's obvious that that payee, that's really some additional text. Let's just click on that. It's really AMZNMKTP, right? So a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense to anyone, right? That's the real data that QuickBooks is reading, but because you have this sort of smart renaming convention, it knows what it is. And also I have the history of transactions letting me know what it is. Now notice here where it says remember category selection. If I click on that, QuickBooks will also remember the transactions that I have categorized in the past. So for example, I'm just gonna do this one Amazon, right? And then I'm gonna add it or accept it. And then once I do that, notice that this will change to green. So now this is telling me there was one individual transaction you did in the past for a transaction that's similar to this. Therefore, I'm not just guessing what it is. I'm actually using your pattern, your behavior to do so. If I click on that, it basically expands it, and I can choose that if I want to. Now that's different than a rule. For Amazon, not for Amazon, for Adobe, I did a rule, and it actually wrote it based on rule. In this particular case, it first did an attempt for categorization, and now it remembered how I actually decided to categorize it, so then it puts it in green. If I go to this gear menu in the top, and I click on where it says remember category selection, right? Notice that once I uncheck that and then I refresh, you will see that it's no longer green. So QuickBooks went back. Let's resort this by date. So QuickBooks went back and re-guessed that it was office supplies, but it doesn't put it in green. So the black category you see there is QuickBooks guessing for you, and then the green category is QuickBooks using history to do it. So that's what the little gearbox here that says remember category selection. You have to have that checkbox turned on, so then QuickBooks sort of paints them green to remind you that those were added based on history. So I'm going to refresh the screen, so that goes back to green based on that memory. So for example, I'm going to resort these by description, and then I'm going to look for others that are popular. Let's look at this one. Chick-fil-A is a good example. So I'm going to click on one of them, and then I'm going to go to payee and type Chick-fil-A. And let's say, for example, sometimes when I go to Chick-fil-A is personal use, sometimes is business use, whatever. So I want to kind of have the capacity to make it one thing or the other. So under category here, I'm going to put personal expenses. Here's a category called owner's pay or personal expenses. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on add. Okay. So you will notice that all the other ones, it will now use owner's pay and personal expenses, because that's what it did in the past. If I go back here in the gear and I uncheck remembered category selection, and then I'm going to scroll down to Chick-fil-A, notice that QuickBooks goes back to its default guess, which was meals and entertainment. So believe it or not, this little checkbox here that says remember category selection has a lot of interesting nuance, and if you know how to use it, you start taking advantage of that little workflow issue. So let's take the second one and pick the vendor here, and then I'm going to make this one meals and entertainment. So remember, the previous one was personal, now the second one is meals and entertainment. Notice that the QuickBooks in green is letting you know the last thing that you did. So if I take the next one and I put personal expenses, and then I click on add, now the next one's going to change to owners and personal expenses, again guessing that that is the pattern. Now because I didn't create a specific rule, it's going to go by the last thing that I chose, right? So at that point I can just accept it or change it if I want to. Take a look at this one, combined insurance premium, right? So I'm just going to click here on show bank details. I wish that show bank details was like a little setting that was like up here, right? So I can just turn it off and on, or if there was a keyboard shortcut where I can turn it off and on, that would be awesome. I kind of hate that I have to scroll all the way up and click here and then change it, because that bank detail thing, to me, it's really useful. Sometimes I have to switch it to the other mode to kind of know what's going on. So let's say, for example, I want to create a rule for this one called combined insurance. Okay, so this is going to be, let's say, workers' comp. Okay, so whatever category is supposed to be. So we'll do workers' comp, change that as an expense category, and let's see what the detail type is, insurance, and then click on save and close. So that's going to go to workers' comp. Then I'm going to click on add. But maybe I don't want QuickBooks to suggest something, or I don't want it to use the last one that I did. In that case, I would use a rule. So what I can do is, from here, I can create a rule simply by setting it up the way I want to. So I don't think I created the vendor last time. So let me create the vendor here. So combined insurance, and then click on save. And right now these are automatically in green, workers' comp, but there's no rule button in there. I can create the rule straight from here. So right before I click on add, I can click on create rule, and then QuickBooks is going to assume, based on the information that it's looking at in the screen, and say, I should create an explicit rule for you. So what it did is it said this is a expense transaction. This rule would be money out. I can choose which bank accounts I want this behavior to be for. Right here it says the description should say combined insurance. So it pretty much builds everything for me. This class and location is optional, only based on whether or not you have those features turned on. So if you don't have them, you would just see up to that payee line. But that's pretty cool. And then to give the rule a name, typically I just copy and paste the stuff that's in the memo, and I put that here on the name. That way I don't have to give it too much thought, and then click on save. So what the rules do, which is pretty cool, it will automatically mark them as a rule for me. And when they're marked as a rule, what happens is, when you go up here to where it says all transactions, you have this option that says recognize, match, transfer, and rule applied. So notice what happens when I click on recognized. So recognize will show me only the ones that are green, because I remember that I did something else with it in the past, or something that it's either matched or with rules. So that's pretty cool. So all the green stuff would be here on the recognized. If I click on that little X and I click there again, I can click on matched. We haven't done any matching here. So I'm going to click on X, and then I'm going to click on transferred. That's if it's a sort of like a bank transfer. And then we have here rule applied. So that's if there is exclusively a rule involved. So that's a rule that we just wrote, which again, I can go back into rules up here in the tab, and I can create my own rules. I can export the rules. I can import them back in. I can change priority. So if I have conflicting rules, I can put them in different priorities. I can also search within the rules, and I can copy them or duplicate them, and delete them or disable them. So the rules got really, really powerful too with all those different settings. So let's click here on description again, and let's go down to another category. So we have here Chevron. So let's say, for example, again, I'm going to open up this little option that says show bank details to see the information that comes from Chevron. So notice that that gives me a number. So that's pretty much the gas station number. And sometimes this will give you context, because, you know, maybe when I go to a Chevron close to my house, that's a personal expense. When I go to Chevron close to the office, that could be a business expense. That's another context in which you could use that information. So it will really be up to you on how you would do that. But then I can create this rule. Let me show you. We're going to put this into auto expense, or a current truck right here. Current truck, let's see if I have a category. Perfect, fuel. So current truck, subcategory fuel. And then what I'll do is I'm going to click on create a rule. And then I'm going to copy and paste this information in this contains box, paste that here. And then when I click on auto add, so what this will do is, and this is one of the risky ones, a lot of people don't like this, is when I create this rule, QuickBooks is not even going to ask me what to do with it. It's just going to record it automatically in the books. See that? And if I click on the magnifying glass on the top of the screen, I can see the last two transactions that were entered, right? Because this magnifying glass shows me a history of the latest 10 or 15 transactions I have created. In here in bank feeds, I can also click on where it says categorized, and I can see the chevrons that were categorized. So where are the chevrons? Right here, you see the 2 chevrons. These are automatically categorized, and notice that it says rule and auto add. So that's letting you know that this was added through auto add rules. What's cool about this screen filter as well is I can click here on where it says all transactions, and I can click on auto add rule, and this will show me all the things that were automatically added into QuickBooks through auto add. So what's really nice about banking, especially with all these little bells and whistles, is it just, again, you probably have to be an experienced user. It gives you a sense of control. It gives you a sense that you can really collaborate with the tool in order to do your categorization. So that's actually pretty awesome when it comes to grouping. Now I could also click on where it says categorize or match, and I can group them by category, which is amazing. Now remember that QuickBooks does some of that categorization guesswork for you, but when you group them by category, and again, QuickBooks guessing that this Google storage is advertising and marketing, which might not be, again, it could provide some additional interesting context. So let's say, for example, for this one, I want to do a couple things in batch. I want to add the Google payee, which needs to be in this column, which is blank, and you should never have an empty payee column for reporting purposes. And let's say this is really office supplies, because that's like a storage fee or something like that. So I'm going to select them all here one by one, or I can click on the little checkbox where it says here advertising and marketing and check them all automatically. Then I'm going to click on where it says update. Then it's going to pop up the update window. I'm going to put my payee, which in this case is Google storage. That's what I'm going to call it. So I'm going to click on add, create that as a vendor. It should always be a vendor. And then category in this case, we'll put it under, is there an office supplies? Yes, there is. Perfect. So put on the office supplies and then click on apply and accept. Now apply and accept will hide them. You won't even see what's going on. If I just click on apply, notice that they all get added. So you see all the vendors added and you see all the categories added. At this point, I can add one by one if I want to, or because I have them all selected, I can click on accept. So you can see how this whole interface is just really, really easy to read. For example, let's say that I'm looking at all these meals and entertainment, and I want to go down and look at a couple of them all in one shot. So let's say all these here, okay, because right now it seems that this was sorted by payee. Actually, this is interesting. If I click on date first, it will sort it by date. Then if I click on description, it will stay sorted by date. No, it doesn't. It's not sorted by date anymore, because right here it's not sorted by date. Let me scroll down a little bit and see if there's any logic here. So, oh yeah, so they are automatically sorted by date, but in descending order. So I'm just kind of observing this as we go, because this just came out in a couple days ago before I recorded this video. So that's a pretty interesting concept. If I sort ascending and then click on description, yeah, so it sorts the dates newest first. That's interesting. If I click on category match, then how does it sort it? So let's go back here. So this is even more interesting. So it seems that if I click on category match, the sub-sorting happens on the description side. So pretty cool. Actually, I find the logic pretty interesting. I would love to have that control, but I find the logic interesting. Anyway, within a category, which in this case, they're grouped by category. Let's say I want to look at a whole bunch that I just want to send to personal. So I can click on the first one that I want to put, and then I can scroll all the way down and put my cursor right under the last one. So in this case, these are all the same payee, or at least that's what's coming from the bank. And I can hold the shift key, and then click on the last box, and it will select them all in group. So you don't have to select everything within the group. You can also kind of segment what you want to select. And then at that point, I would click on update. I would create my vendor. So let's type it in there. And then add, make sure it's a vendor. Always create your payees as vendor unless they're a customer that you invoice. And then the category for this would be personal expenses. Perfect. And I'm just going to click on apply and accept, so I don't even have to see them there and accept them for 1 second layer. So that's just pretty interesting. I like how all those things work. Now the other thing is I'm going to sort this by date again. And let's say that I'm looking for a very specific thing. Let's say I'm looking for, let's call it Starbucks. So I'm going to click here on search. And then I'm going to type Starbucks and then click on the search box. And then it will show me all the Starbucks. And even if they have different store numbers in this case, it will filter that for me. So that's actually pretty awesome how I can do that. So in this case, I wouldn't even have to have them grouped by date. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter anyway. So I can click on select all here in the top. I can go to update. I can put this under, let's call it meals and entertainment, and the payee would be Starbucks. Again, I recommend that you always create those payees as vendors, and then click on apply and select, and then I can click on the little X next to Starbucks to get rid of that filter. So I think I've showed you everything on the screen. The other thing that I want to talk about is the matching process.